We're going to start off this knowledgeable session, inshallah. Allahumma علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. We ask Allah to increase us in knowledge and help us learn from the knowledge that we learn and help us all around. We'll be starting off this session today. So we're here at the MAS conference, and the topic is divorce phenomena. No one is immune. That's what we'll be talking about today with our esteemed speakers. You'll notice in the app there's a question and answer session. You can go ahead and ask your questions there. And there's a rating there if you're interested in giving a 5-star rating as well. And as well, I'll be telling you afterwards about testimonials. If you benefit from this lecture, FYI wants to hear about it so they can have more sessions and get more involved and help with things like that. So if you feel like giving back, and donation is one way, but if you feel like giving back in a non-monetary way, without paying, you're welcome to videotape a testimonial and help out FYI in that sense to spread the word and spread the comfort level so people can get more involved and talk about these topics. When I said comfort level, it's because we're going previously, in the previous session, they talked about suicide, an uncomfortable topic. And today we also talk about another uncomfortable topic, which is divorce phenomena. And years ago, if you attended Islamic conferences, you might have not heard about divorce because nobody wants to talk about it, right? Or they want to sweep it under the rug or something like that. I know when I was younger, I didn't hear much about it. And now we're hearing more about it in the Muslim community. And it's prevalent almost everywhere. We're just hearing about it. Everybody wonders why and how to prevent it. Is it preventable? Do we want to prevent it? Luckily, we have 2 speakers here today that will enlighten us, inshallah, today about the topic of divorce. If you'd like to ask your questions, there's a Q&A session that's right on the app. You're welcome to ask a question. Be sure to click the anonymous button or anonymous tab on the bottom. There's no reason for everybody to know your name, unless you really want everybody to know your name. It doesn't help because you just want your question answered, right? That's my opinion. You're welcome to do as you wish. But we encourage you also not to ask questions about specific examples or give too many details that people from your community can figure it out. There's really no need for that either. I'm your moderator today. My name is Ratib, and I'll be moderating the conversation. We have with us the 2 speakers who have already spoken here at FYI, and we're so glad that they're back with us to speak about this topic of divorce. Jazakumullah khair, both of them. I haven't asked which speaker would like to go first, which one's more comfortable. Dr. Sameera already pointed to Sheikh Kifah, so you're going first, Sheikh. And I'm so glad he's going. And I'm so glad, not that he's going first, I'm so glad that he's here. Because sometimes maybe best is left to last, or first goes is better. Allahu a'lam. Of course, I'm trying to keep it lighthearted because this is a heavy topic. This is not easy, and we're going to hear things. The Sheikh Kifah is the Imam of the Orland Park Masjid, very well known in the Chicago area. I mean, I know him since I was a little kid. And I'm not even from the Chicago area, I'm from Detroit, but he's even been to Detroit many times and involved many things. I asked Sheikh Kifah the question. I know that he gets invited to a lot of weddings. Don't all Imams, right? They're all always their weekends are packed with weddings, especially in the summers. But I was curious, has he been to more weddings or has he been involved with more divorce cases? And because of his expertise, he's been involved with more divorce cases than he has been in wedding. I assume just any imam can help with a wedding, but it takes a specialized person to be involved with divorce because of the many issues that are involved. And Dr. Sameera Ahmed is right next to him, and I'll be introducing her as well when it's her turn to speak. We'll go on ahead and get started with Sheikh Kifah. Jazakallah khair for being here, Sheikh. Tawbah. Most welcome.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So there were 2 topics given to me. I will cover only one because 17 minutes is barely to cover 1.10 of the first topic itself. So if there are severe disputes among married couples, how to handle that, inshallah ta'ala. Let me start by saying you need to identify first what is that the severe dispute that is happening between you and your spouse. Is it that a matter of abuse? And it could be verbal, it could be mental, it could be physical, it could be emotional, name it. Is it a matter of family involvement, that someone from the family is controlling the argument inside the house? Or is it about lack of responsibility? Is the husband someone who is not willing to work and provide as Islamically ordained? Is the wife not ready to have kids and raise them? Marriage for her was something different than having 2-3 kids and dealing with them with all the challenges that come with them, because tarbiyah is a huge matter. I mean, how many movies you have watched, you just turn your face for like 1 minute of a child and something happens. So caring for a child 24/7 is not an easy task. And we need to prepare our kids to such understanding of what marriage is about. And if we don't, we are not getting our kids ready to have a type of marriage that can survive and be enjoyed at the same time. Or is it matters that are ethical? Did the husband find the wife, talking to someone else? Or did the wife find the husband cheating with someone else? Or is he someone like falling into Islamic ethical ordained matters of haram, gambling, or matters that fear, the focus of the person from caring for the family and to being self-centered? Is it a matter of communications? I mean, there's so many things. So when you are to define something of a severe dispute, it's not like we're talking about simple things. And the way to handle it, most people run first into each other, try to solve things. But if things don't get solved, how long are you going to wait to seek help? Unfortunately, in most of the cases that come to our offices, it's almost near divorce. And you can't patch much. And based on that, if you fail to handle matters on your own, then try to bring family that in the past session I said Allah described as فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. It is not just because he's your dad, he should represent you. Or he's your older brother, he should represent you. Allah gave the term hakam. Hakam means a judge. Someone who is known to have sound judgment. Someone who is known to be neutral. If that didn't work, are you gonna call the sheikh? How many sessions am I able to provide you for free? We have an average 4 to 5 sessions per case, for example, at my office. But then our matters solved in 3 to 5 matters of sessions. Maybe, maybe not, most likely not. If you're gonna go to a professional, like Dr. Sameera here, do you have the finances to be able to cover that and provide that? Does your insurance cover it? So there's problems like, if it matters of how many times, finances. But between all that, there has to be 3 ways to look at the problems. You either have both sides agreeing to solve, and that has the best chance of working things out. When we have both the husband and the wife agreeing to come, because if the dhamir in the ayah is going on the spouses, yurida, if the husband and the wife have an intention of fixing things, then there's a chance for the counselor or the therapist to help them out. But if they come already fix him, and as if I have nothing to do with him, the problem is all on or fix her, that if you got yourself outside the problem cause, then you're not willing to give in. And the ayah says very clearly, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ A family is a qawm, is a group. حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم, unless you change that which is in yourself. If they both come, that's one track. If one person comes alone or calls the phone, every time I come to the office every morning, there's between 10 to 15 phone calls waiting for me. For me to call back, to get in touch or not to get in touch, and then to make an appointment, and then to sit down and listen. It takes a long time. And at that time, my role of involvement is to offer support, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So if it's only the husband or only the wife is calling, then what is that I can give a support for a person? Or is it divorce? So it's either two people willing to solve the problem, or one person is calling and you need to give them support, or divorce. I'm gonna go backwards because the most important one is when two people want to solve things. Divorce, I wanna focus on two issues. If people already decided to divorce, many people reach out to the masajid to have such an understanding before they go and file for divorce, which is fine. But there are Islamic issues that you need to be aware of. Number one, if you were married overseas, there's a problem. Your divorce here in the US does not clear you from your marriage, legal marriage documentation overseas. So you need to solve that. Many people think that if he or she can just go to the American court and file for divorce, it's done. And we have so many cases that people do that and they don't even do the Sharia divorce. That's a problem. And they remarry. Well, if that is the case, my job is to finalize the first divorce fully, Islamically and legally, to make sure that that person is ready for the next step. But if someone is married overseas, in many cases it's way more better to call on a lawyer overseas and just do the divorce overseas and it's all done. You don't have to bother doing it here. But if it is done in the US, and this is the way we do it, the same way we need from people to get married first in the court and then come to do the Islamic marriage, we ask them that you need to do the Islamic, the legal divorce first in the court, and then come and do the Islamic divorce. And if the marriage happened in the US, we give let us say a scenario, the husband refuses to divorce his wife. He felt that he was forced into a legal divorce, his wife took money from him, whatever, blah, blah, blah. At that time, my job is to call the husband and give him a time frame. In 1 month, and 2 weeks, and 6 weeks. If you don't show up, if I will either file it as a regular divorce, or a khula from the side of the wife, or what we call talaq al-tafriq, where the judge or the sheikh in my case will use his authority and declare the invalidity of marriage and apply the divorce if we feel someone is abusing his or her authority not to finalize the divorce. We cannot do that if the marriage is overseas. Because if I divorce someone here and she's still married overseas and remarries someone here, then she'll be married legally to two people. And if she goes visit overseas, her family, for example, her ex-husband can put her in jail if he can provide the legal paper. So there's details, not much to go, but just giving you some tips. So whenever it comes to divorce, we as our role to try to process, and it is an option. It is not the best option, as the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Inna abghad al-halal 'inda Allah al-talaq," but it is an option for so many people. Many people are in a very bad relationships, and divorce is the solution. Islam is a realistic religion. We don't have to have, maybe you had better understanding of a beautiful marriage, but reality proved you something wrong. Divorce can be a solution. But of course, we have the hadith that it is something hated. We know that the mission of shaitan, as the Prophet also spoke, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to separate families and make them divorce. So it's our chance. وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ لَعَلَّ اللَّهَ يُحْدِثُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ أَمْرًا. So many ayat and hadith, I'm not here to mention all that. But if the wife calls or the husband calls and complains about his wife in one aspect or another aspect, my job is, which is the second track I said, is to what? To offer support. That support is, If the other person is not willing to change, can you change yourselves to deal with him as he is or as she is? That is an option on the table. How long are you willing to wait and practice sabr based on there's kids involved, based on what are my options if I get divorced, how old are you, how many kids you have, financially. There's so many factors because we are given so broad topics to talk about, and every case is a very detailed case that has to be customized on the person's life. That's why these cases are different from each person to another person. We just give general guidelines to understand how the process happens, but then every case has to be studied, individually. And based on that, a person will make a choice that I should do this or I should not do that. And sometimes it is the spiritual support that they get from the sheikh that helps them cope with. The same way you might be having challenges in business, or you might be having challenges with family, friends, and siblings, and you need to listen a word of support, tazkira, makes you feel good. It gives you like a dose to continue 1 more year or 6 more months, whatever it is. My job at that time to ease on you, if it was just venting out, or if it was just seeking some extra tips to handle matters here and there, advice like try to grow in other matters of life, try to get something new, get yourself busy with something else, focus on things, on the good part of the relationship. All these tips will be given them based on the condition of the person, based on their problem that they are given. If both parties are coming to address matters, then we listen to each side of the story, as they say, and we tell them, I'm aware of that. I love it. I should buy one iPad. Well, I had an iPad. At that time, we tell them what's the core problem in that matter. And back to the points I mentioned first. Is it abuse? Is it neglect? And I'm gonna talk on one concept only because I'm already 4 minutes. I wanna cover two things only. Number one, communication. I'm gonna focus on communication matters. Because if someone fails to work, then that's very obvious, but there's a lot of complaints about there's no hiwar, there's no way of communicate well in that matter. You have to understand, as the husband and wife and what they have communication issues about them. People think differently. If a man talks, he talks for a certain point to prove it. في مصلحة, there is a benefit for it. He wants to show his qualities. That's how we talk. And that's what he practices that among men, to prove himself. Females in general find themselves by explaining who they are. So they enjoy talking and sharing what they are going through to demonstrate how they are feeling. So as a husband, you cannot interpret any discussion that your wife brings to you as a complaint. Because the antenna of the husband, if the wife complains about something, the first thing he thinks, that's a problem, how can I solve it? For him, it's not about the wife is just trying to tell him, venting out. No, مشكلة كيف بدي أحلها. And that's a wrong approach. If you understand that your wife needs emotional support, then you don't have to interpret that every complaint she talks about the kids or about her family or about her work is something that she wants you to come and make a committee تعمل مؤتمر how to solve this problem. Let her talk, let her vent. Listening is an art. And when you understand that, you are able to help yourself deal with the matter better. When you think of a matter that your wife brings it to you, for example, like a problem. If your wife comes and tells you, I have a headache. The man, headache, Tylenol, cabinet, take a couple pills. No, that's how he thinks. I bet he doesn't know which cabinet the Tylenol is in. The wife does. But she still said, I have headache. What she's asking, I need support. So probably a hug will be a lot more better than telling her to take a couple more Tylenol. Maybe a ruqya, put your hand on her head and make dua for her, will help us even that. So that's one thing. Number two, men don't speak unless they ran out of their own self-created solutions. He finds it as if it's hard to consult. Yani if you are going to drive somewhere, if there's no GPS with you for some reason, your phone is not working, it will take you a long time before you decide to stop at a gas station to ask where is the directions. You're gonna go this way and we're gonna try this way. Tell on your own. Your wife might ask 4 gas stations in 1 hour just to get assurance of what she's doing is right. If you know that the wife likes assurance, so always give words of support. MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. The moment you put the food in your mouth, beautiful. You don't have to wait to look at her and Allah alayki, tell her that the food is beautiful before you even chew it and swallow it. They like assurance. They find themselves because to her, words of support and appreciation means what she means to you, even in simple matters. The man doesn't like to be challenged in what he thinks he's handling matters. So much involvement from the wife in every single detail that the husband does, annoying you, that's how the approach is made. And that creates what? People that are people get dry. The husband will not be coming much to the house because he doesn't want to go into arguments. The topic is huge. I have 5 seconds left.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I took as a takeaway, that there is a way for spouses to understand each other. That's what I understood from you. Many people have thrown their hands up in the air and said, "Khalas, we can't understand each other." It sounds like what Sheikh Kifah, what I understood from him, there is a way, and I'd love to spend a lot more hours listening to you than the few minutes that have been allocated. I wanted to introduce Dr. Sameera Ahmed. Before I do, I just also wanted to mention, I noticed there was questions and answers before we even started the session. That's interesting. That means people are interested in this topic, and I wish there was a lot more time. Let's do as much as we can with what we have. The best questions are the ones that ask the speakers how to expand on what they've already said, if they've said any point that's not as clear, as opposed to going into details about your situation with a divorce or your friends or something, because that really requires a lot more time. I'd like to introduce Dr. Sameera Ahmed, who's the Executive Director of the Family and Youth Institute. She's a PhD in clinical psychology. MashaAllah, Allah's blessed her with a long list of credentials, books outside if you'd like to take a look at any information on that. Without further ado, Dr. Sameera, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'm so excited to see so many of you here today. What we do every year at the convention, when issues and questions keep coming up over and over again, we track that because we want to know what are the issues and concerns of our community. And one theme that kept coming over and over again was, the question of divorce. What do we do? Sometimes it needs to happen, and then where do you go for help, right? And so when we suggested this topic, we weren't really sure if people were going to show up, and we didn't know how many people would be interested in this topic. But alhamdulillah, you guys have all proved us wrong, and we recognize this is an issue. And I think one of the things to also remember is each one of us have probably been impacted by divorce, either directly or indirectly. Either we've thought about it, we've gone through it, a relative has gone through it, a loved one has gone through it, and if you're like me, when these situations happened, we really didn't have anywhere to go beforehand. alhamdulillah, the situation has changed. And so what I want to do is kind of tell you about some of what we can do to help individuals. So again, like I said, we kept seeing this issue over and over again. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Family Youth Institute, one of the things that we really work towards is meeting your needs. We know that there are issues in the community, but we can't just use anecdotal evidence to give direction and suggestion. We need to understand what the problem is, what the challenges are, do the research to give our community the best that we can given our realities, understand not only what is the problem, but what are the solutions? What are we going to do about this? And then develop resources to help you and me through this process, right? And as we develop this, we need to give it back to all of you to use. And for you to give us feedback on, does this help? How does it help? What does it help? What do you need? So again, Ratib had mentioned earlier that if you have time after the session and want to share with us your experience and how things have helped you, please do share. Amina's up here front, and she can work with you later on after the session to get that feedback. But the idea is we're constantly in service of our community. What are your needs and how do you get it? And so similarly with the issue of divorce, right? We all know someone who's gone through it, right? And so we wanted to know, what do we do about it, right? And so we had a study, and in that study, we recognized there is really nothing out there in the Muslim community on this topic. And so we had to use some of the research that was done for other communities and to kind of help us understand what to do. And then we interviewed imams, social workers, therapists, individuals who've been divorced, to go through what were the challenges that they had, what were the needs that they had. And then we did a survey, and that survey had 387 people participating, give us information about what do they need, what do they want, what type of help was needed for us as a community. And so you have this FYI has a divorcing toolkit, which covers multiple different topics based on the feedback that you all gave. In this toolkit, it covers, what do you do if you're thinking about divorce, right? Because sometimes it takes time to figure out, is there hope for this relationship? Is there something, if I can do some therapy, if I can talk, if I can work it, how long do I keep trying? And it talks about also, what do you do and how do you keep yourself safe and helpful and healthy when you're going through the divorce? And then how do you handle after divorce? Because it's a loss of a relationship. And there's a lot of feelings, emotions, and challenges that you have to deal with. So where is the support for that? And then some of us want to consider remarriage. So what are the issues and considerations for that? And then other topics such as later in life, children, all of those. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of that. I'm going to try just to high points for some of these topics. But I would encourage you to do look at their website. I think there was a QR code that was passed around with that information. All you have to do is just scan it, and you can get access to those resources immediately. But I want to start off with a poll. Because I know it's after lunch and a lot of us are a little bit tired. So if you want to text 22333 and enter Sameera Ahmed 180. Okay. Text 22333, enter Sameera Ahmed 180. Your information will not be, you don't have any identifying information, so don't worry about that. So you do that, and then I want to ask you a question, so you get a sense of where everybody else is. You guys all set? Can I change the screen? Yes? No?
Want to ask the question so they can think about it?
The question is, what stage of kind of the divorce process are you in right now? Okay.
Do you want to give them options or do you want to keep going?
There are options up there. Ready? Okay. Can you guys see it? And I'm not sure if the poll is working. So if you guys are setting it up, so you're contemplating divorce, in the midst of a divorce, oh, it's working. Post-divorce, remarriage, later divorce, or supporting a loved one through a divorce, right?
Yeah. And they're answering with one letter?
One letter,
The letter that's next to the one.
right? And realizing that when we talk about the topic of divorce, people are at different stages. And you may be here unmarried, wanting to prevent a divorce as well, right? So, and for those of you who are here for that reason, I commend you, right? Because that's extremely smart. But you want to know what are these different things. So we see, we see people who are contemplating divorce, post-divorce, and others. And alhamdulillah, and hopefully what we can do is provide a glimpse of some of the resources that are available and help you understand that, you're not alone in a lot of these things. And so we'll start with that. For those of you who are kind of thinking about divorce, you've tried you've tried conflict resolution, you've talked to different people, you've different things. You want to really make sure you assess your marriage when you're in a calm state, not when you're emotionally angry, upset, frustrated. You want to think, when you're thinking about these issues, how much of the issue is you? What have you done? Like Sheikh Kifah was saying, can you control in the situation? Have you done everything that you can in your ability to help this relationship? Recognizing, have you gone to professional help? Not at the end when everyone's kind of called it quits, but initially as an issue has happened, right? If you can, because a lot of times, as we talked yesterday in the conflict session, a lot of it is, misunderstanding, miscommunication. And if you can address it, great. But you want to be able to go through that process of figuring out, discerning, is there hope in this relationship, right? And as you're doing that, you also want to educate yourself. What, if you were to go get a divorce, what all does it entail? How do you prepare yourself? What are the things that you need to think about beforehand? What are the resources you need to gather to make sure you're making an educated, informed decision? And as you're constantly doing that, make istikhara. Right? You can never leave these matters just to kind of your will. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance as you go through this process of trying to figure out, is there hope, is there change, is there something that we can do? You've educated yourself, and then you start to make the decisions and work towards that. And as we're talking about this, if people have any specific reflections about this stage, any concerns or questions, feel free to put that in, so we can all be thinking about it. We're going to keep the questions for the question app, but if you have any kind of reflections about this stage that you'd like other people to be aware of, so that they can find solace. But this time period is really confusing because you don't know what to do, you need support, you need direction, and sometimes you're getting confusing information. And so that's why the anchor is really important, that spiritual anchor, as well as educational information, being able to say, okay, I've done everything that I can, I have all the information, I have all my ducks in order, I know what's going on, right? So recognizing that these stages of kind of thinking of should I get a divorce or not takes time. And I've worked with people where sometimes it's taken years to recognize over and over again that, okay, I do need to leave this relationship. And so then you go to the midst of divorce, where it's recognizing that there is this emotional roller coaster of going up and down and confused, and recognize that divorce, the emotions associated with divorce, it's not a linear process. It's not you do one stage, then you do next, and then you do, no, it's like up and down, you get triggered by a situation, you go back, all the way back. All of these things happen. There's this emotional roller coaster of anger, guilt, confusion, hope, fear, all of these things. And you need to recognize that these are normal experiences in the divorce process, right? And as you're going through that, sometimes you're angry at yourself. Why did I stay in this relationship so long? Why am I so dumb? And we say mean things to each other. When you're down, you don't need to beat yourself up anymore, right? You need to get support. And so when you're doing that, really make sure to take care of yourself. Physically, make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, you're getting the help. Cognitively understand what are the stages of divorce, what are the resources, where to get help, how to get help. emotionally, grieving the relationship, right? Understanding your emotions, why you're feeling this way, where are they coming from? All of this kind of processing takes time, and I would highly recommend working with a therapist on these issues. Making sure socially you have people around you. Because going from being a couple and a family to now working towards singlehood, it's often difficult because your social support is often not there. Make sure you have those social support. Reach out to people, ask them, do things with people. You need that. And spiritually, relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dua in your sujood, right? So these are things that you want to be able to do, that as you're going through that divorce, you're relying on all the resources available to you. And when you're interacting with your spouse, as much as possible, work towards a collaborative divorce as much as you can. Because we recognize realities, it may not always happen, but if you can, it's better for your mental health, their mental health, and your kids' mental health, right? And recognize that when you're communicating with your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, try to be brief in your interactions, friendly, informative, but firm. Start maintaining, you have to make sure you start separating emotionally from him or her. Also recognize there's going to be low expectations. Things may be promised, it may not happen. It's part of the process, right? Expect that will happen. And be content that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you and you're doing the best that you can in that situation. And when it comes to your children, if you have children, make sure you're thoughtful and age appropriate in how you tell your kids. Right? Because where they are developmentally, how old they are, is going to matter how they take this and how they're going to understand the relationship. If they're younger, they may believe it's their fault. If they're older, they may have reactions. Again, as a parent, if you can, do it together in a transparent way. Again, we have resources on that, but you really want to make sure you reassure your kids and emphasize that divorce, it's not their fault. It's issue between you and your spouse, and really communicate stability. And it's okay to kind of say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to help you, and we're going to work together through this process. Okay? And then we talk about post-divorce, right? Once the divorce is finalized. Sometimes people believe that, okay, once the divorce is over, okay, I'll be okay. Things will be wonderful, I'll be fine, I'll be able to deal with it because, my spouse is out of my life, the stressor. But you gotta realize that you're mourning a loss of a relationship. And that's going to take time to resolve, and you'll have to have time to grieve over that. And so you want to make sure that you recognize that, obviously the theme of the conference, right? There's with hardship comes ease, right? There will be ease after this hardship, but you need to go through that process, right? You'll need to develop a toolkit of coping, how to process your emotions. When you get triggered, what do? How do you calm yourself? What do you do to distract yourself? What do you do to get support? Who do you go for support? You need to have that toolbox. You want to be able to explore emotionally what's underlying these emotions that you're having when you're getting triggered. Why are you getting triggered? Processing what's going on, right? And you want to be around individuals who are uplifting and positive. Because just because you got a divorce doesn't mean you're a pariah. There's no need to be ostracized. There's no need to think that your world is over. When we look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you see companions, many different companions, great individuals, who happen to get a divorce. Some people just it doesn't work out, and you have to grow it from that experience. But it takes time. And so really try to reframe this aloneness as a tool for reflection, honesty, and kind of recognizing where are your potential for growth, what are the things that you need to work through, so that when you go into a new relationship, if you choose to do so, you're in a better place. And again, when you're talking about children, make sure that the home environment that you're creating, you want to really try to maintain positive relationship as much as you can with them as well as your ex, to make sure you try to be on the same page on parenting. It's not always going to happen, but do the best that you can, right? And helping them, having a co-parenting approach will really help in your children's adjustment post-divorce. Okay? And then when it comes to marriage readiness, if you decide that you want to get married again, right? Really think about what's motivating your desire. Are you jumping from one relationship to the other without processing your previous relationship? Because if you do that, you're setting up your second relationship up for failure. You're more likely to get a divorce. So give yourself some time after the first relationship to process what happened, why it happened, how did you feel, what did you learn, how can you grow, all of these things you want to kind of think through. And then also, what's your relationship like with your ex or your children? Again, talking them through the process as well. And before you actually consider going on to a new relationship, have you emotionally healed? So we're running out of time, and I apologize. But I do want to highlight a couple different resources because there's no way we can cover everything. The FYI has a number of different resources. We have the Divorce Toolkit that kind of walks you through this process. There's a webinar that we cover this topic as well. And the therapy guide, because oftentimes in this process you're going to need some help walking through addressing the issues. And then if you decide to get remarried, there's a marriage toolkit. In addition, we do have an online program, Pair to Pair, a marriage online module that you can go through as a course. It helps you through to kind of figure out what are the areas that you need to work on, that may be a conflict, maybe an area of conversation that needs to be addressed before you take the next step of marriage with the individual that you decided to work through. In addition to the resources FYI has, there are many other alhamdulillah organizations that have been doing some amazing work. Wasila organization, one of the individuals up here in the front, they do amazing work by providing support services, virtual support services for individuals. I've sent my patients, individuals that I've worked with in therapy, to them, and working how to deal with parenting loss and changes and support. All of that is wonderful, and I would urge you to use those resources. Also, a lot of times you don't know what the resources are available or what are the issues legally that you have to kind of address. Sheikh Kifah mentioned a couple, but also there's a YouTube channel, Chicago Muslim Divorce Lawyer. If you just follow him, he has a number of different sessions that will be helpful. And when it comes to domestic violence, Peaceful Families has a lot of resources and information and education that can help you as well. And ISPU is a collaborator of ours who did some research on the topic of divorce as well. So all of these resources are there. Alhamdulillah, we're in a better place as a community than we were 10 years ago. We have a number of different resources. We ask that you please use these resources as well as additional resources that we do have. The QR code will help you find those resources, as well as if you want to go to our website. And here's a QR code, and Jazakallah khair, and I'll pass it on to Martin.
Jazakallah khair for both of our speakers. Wow, we have 18 questions in 5 minutes. Are you both ready? Yalla, we're going to finish them. Bismillah. Let's do a quick lightning round with Sheikh. If you could tell us real quick, number one reason for getting divorced that you get. You mentioned you get 15 messages on your answering machine in the morning. Number one reason. Number two reason. Can you say them in one word or 2 words? So I can ask the next lightning round question.
Ethical issues and family involvement.
Ethical issues and family involvement. Dr. Sameera, you mentioned real quick that you highly recommend that people work with a therapist, and I'm assuming that in the toolkit, there's some steps on how to work and when to work with a therapist. Question is there a clear line? At this point, you're too late, you should be working with a therapist, or is that always vague, and that's the problem?
First of all, I would make sure that when you work with a therapist, you have the right therapist, because you don't always, and you have to find a good fit, and you want to make sure you have the right training. Please do not go to new coaches. They're not trained in this field. I have had to deal with many marriages that have been broken because people went to a coach as opposed to someone who's trained in the field. So that was one, and then the question was...
Is there a clear line? Now you should go to a therapist. Your problem's this big.
Yeah, if you have tried reading and that hasn't made any difference, if you tried having conversations that doesn't help, and then it's time to go to a therapist. You don't wait to the end. Start at the beginning. When it's just at the beginning, then you're able to do a lot more than when it's been years and years of marriage conflict. There's a lot more hurt that's involved. It's much harder to undo, to kind of the misunderstandings. It's possible, I've worked with couples who've been married 10 years and been angry and upset, and now, alhamdulillah, they're in a better place, and we are able to prevent a divorce. However, both parties need to be open and willing to change. I think that's important. You can't always blame one person or the other.
Sheikh Kifah, 4 questions involve preempting divorce when preparing for a marriage. You mentioned real quick about some of the ethics, and if a person had good ethics, and family involvement are the top 2 issues. What can you tell us real quick about pre-marriage? I know that people just generally talk about mahr mu'akhar. Is there more that people should be talking about to prepare themselves to avoid divorce?
Well, better homework done, long, healthy relationships, sustainability, inshallah ta'ala. I would suggest the most important thing, selflessness. Most of the problems come from the ana, the I. That you want to stand for everything you think you are right. Actually, I want to quote Ibn Ata al-Sakandari is a great scholar that says, أصل كل شهوة وغفلة الرضا عن النفس. The origin of every problem, if it was a sin or a pleasurable desire, is self-satisfaction. When you are self-pleased with yourself, you see yourself better than others. There is no one to tell you anything that you can take as an advice. You think you are higher than anyone else. You don't have reception to what is right and what is wrong. And this mentality cannot survive in a marriage. Because marriage, you're gonna deal with the same problem that 2 people have to take a decision on. If you think that you are number 1 and you are the only one, well, there's a partner that has to take a decision with you. You cannot just take it upon yourself. So if we can teach ourselves to be able to incorporate a decision making with another partner in life as a spouse, and what we look and expect, like, on ethical matters, and why don't we apply it in marriage? We hear about the Shafi'i saying, how did you reach this level of piety and taqwa? He said, I never met a Muslim, but I felt he's better than me. Beautiful. Can you apply that with your spouse? When there's a problem, can you see that your wife could be a better person than you, or your husband can be a better? At the moment you drop the ana, then there's a chance for better relationship. The Prophet, let me just finish with this, receiving revelation, revelation as Quran and the Sunnah as the wahi that Allah gave to him. After the Sulh of Hudaybiyah, and he decided that he's not going to go to Mecca for Umrah, and he used to go back to Medina without going Umrah. A huge problem happened. Umar came. Didn't you say you saw a dream we're going to enter Mecca? لا تدخلون المسجد الحرام. There was a verse in the Quran and the Prophet told him, and then the Prophet decided to walk back. He said, I am the Messenger of Allah and Allah will support me. So when he had dealt with that, he said, shave your heads and slaughter your sheep, as break down the Umrah and go back. No one did. Imagine kull Sahaba, no one responded. When he walked to his tent, stressed, as we say, Salama, his wife, she said, you know what, go outside, don't talk to anyone, shave your head and slaughter your sheep. So he went outside, shaved his head, slaughtered a sheep, and then everyone followed. So the revelation receiving person, the Prophet ﷺ, had to listen to his wife's advice. If he did not demonstrate the leadership of humbleness and agreeing to have a person with him to consult with, then you will run into a lot of dead ends.
Jazakallah khair.
I just wanted to add.
Please.
So in terms of what can you do to prevent divorce? One of the biggest things is 9 out of 10 couples who receive pre-marriage education are less likely to get divorced. this research that we've done when we looked at what are the different, we started off with okay, divorce and what were the issues and challenges. What we saw over and over again is, had I had pre-marriage education, I probably wouldn't have gone with this marriage. Had I had pre-marriage education, I would have had more positive communication. So if you really want to prevent divorce, pre-marriage education. We have 3 things for you. We have a toolkit that goes through step by step what are the different issues and challenges you need to start thinking about even before you have somebody in mind. So anybody who's like 18, 16, whenever you start thinking about marriage, before you even have someone in mind, go through that toolkit. And when you find someone who might be somebody, there are a bunch of questions and things to consider and red flags. And when you think, okay, this is the person I really want to go through, we also, well, before that we have a workshop. But then when you find the person that you really want to work, you think it's going to be the person for you, we have an online program where you go through the course before you get married. And what I would recommend to all of you, before you announce your engagement, take that course. It is much better to do it before you announce it because of the fact that if you find red flags, you're more likely and willing to leave the relationship after you've made the announcement, the invitations are out. At that point, when you're taking it, there's really no point.
But it's so unromantic to talk about divorce before you get married. Tell me.
Well, you're not talking about divorce.
What are you
right?
doing?
You're talking about expectations, values, families, all the different things that we know will lead to divorce if you're not on the same page. Right? And so that's one of the reasons, kind of the preventative work that we're doing on kind of divorce aspect. Now, when divorce happens, okay, how do you do it well? And that's why this toolkit was here. That's why the research that we've done has been looking at how do we support individuals through this process.
So it sounds like we'd be taking the anti-divorce antidote, not making it sound like divorce. In other words, it'd be romantic, and hopefully it will decrease your chances of getting this phenomenon that the title of this topic was that no one is really immune. Is no one really immune? Just answer me that. We know the Prophet said, a great character. He didn't get divorced. He was immune. Are we all possibly someday not getting divorced if we don't work at it? Tell me more.
I mean, I think you have to realize a lot of times people will say, especially for our generation, well, my parents never had these pre-marriage courses. Why do I? My parents never went to therapy, why should I, right? All of these things. You have to recognize that we're in a very different cultural context now, right? For those of you who've immigrated, you had a family support system, you had a neighborhood support system, you have so many different supports. Now in the US, we're on our own. Everything needs to be fulfilled by the other person. And so there's increased stress. And there's very little support. And so if you're not having those other sources of support, you're more vulnerable. And if you don't have the tools, you're more likely to have issues. So you can be married and the marriage full of unhappiness and conflict, but if it results in a toxic relationship, maybe divorce is a better option.
Sheikh Kifah, last word, 30 seconds, so we can wrap up.
No one is immune. That's a true statement. But there is a lot of marriage to enjoy. Marriage is a journey to serve Allah. It is not a target. It is not the end. If you understand that with a spouse you are a better servant to God, that God is the journey you are journeying to. If you just can't figure that out, then you will work on beautifying the journey with your spouse to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you're journeying to your spouse, then you're running to someone who's imperfect. It's going to be a lot of bumps. Allah is the direction. فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. If you know how to journey to Allah together, you'll be in good shape, inshallah.
And you can leave this session by saying what I learned today is Sheikh Kifah said, there's a lot to enjoy in marriage. And I regret telling him that we're ending the session because I want to hear more about that. for a different time, inshallah. Let's wrap it up, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for all attending and all those who are here today. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Jazakumullah khair for everybody for attending. Booth, the tables on your right if you want to pick up literature about the FYI and learn a little more. If you'd like to give a testimonial, there's a small gift for you, and you'll be entered to receive a gift card for those who do give a testimonial. Brothers and sisters are welcome to videotape a testimonial about what they learned. Give us 5 stars on the rating on the app. Your questions, we know that there were 18 questions that